Hi, I'm a little bit frustrated because I just made almost this entire video and my camera stopped working on it. So I know this information that I'm sharing is important, especially coming through at this particular juncture with the eclipse. So I'm going to try to sum this up as best I can while still hitting key points. So those of you who know that I've been helping my son with his type 1 diabetes diagnosis and the healing process, and we are determined to cure that, to turn that around. And of course, it's known in the medical industry that that is not a curable disease. That is they call it a disease, they call it not curable, they call it lifelong. They do not acknowledge that there's any possibility of correcting that. So many of you know the other day I took my son in for a checkup, and though we had some positive feedback, we had a great bill of excellent blood sugar management, though we haven't been doing insulin, we've been eating raw foods and doing herbs, we were confronted with a different paradigm. And this is something that, this is what this video is about. This is about creating a sacred container for the work that you're doing. I bring this up right now, especially because we are moving into a new moon solar eclipse in Pisces. And right now, as you're watching this, this is what I want to emphasize. And I want to give you real information as to why this is important. So, when you are moving into a healing process, and I'm going to back up a little bit and say I had a very dear friend of mine who was diagnosed with what they call terminal colon cancer. This was many years ago, about 10 years ago, and gave him about 2 months to live, even told him with surgery it was not going to be fixable, and instead of even telling family or going that route at all, he decided he was going to only surround himself with the people who believed he could heal. Now, I'm skipping a whole portion of the story for this part, which is he only surrounded himself with people who believed in him, who believed he could heal, and he only did those things beneficial to him that would allow his mindset to stay very focused on his healing process. And this worked. He is 10 years later, still cancer-free. And I believe, and he believes, that is the main reason, is that focused, pinpoint intention on healing. So now I kind of made the mistake the other day of not properly preparing my son for moving back into this space where he'd had a very traumatic experience. I mean, granted, we weren't the exact same building, but we were right across the street from where he had a very traumatizing life experience, and he had his very normal life kind of flipped upside down into this place where he was told he had this incurable illness. So I took him back there for his checkup yesterday, and even though I warned him they were going to say, hey, you're doing great, but it's just a honeymoon stage, which is what they say to diabetics if they have like a relapse and start making insulin and have like some low blood sugars. They say, oh, it's just a honeymoon phase, everyone has it, but eventually your pancreas stops working forever and ever, and you're just a diabetic forever. This is like their thing. So even though we talked about that was possible, I really didn't think clearly about, okay, this kid has been 100% on his affirmations, on his crystals, on his herbs, on his food, very clearly pointed in the direction of, hey, I don't have diabetes anymore, I'm curing myself, and been very strong and focused and successful and great. And then I put that very still fragile creation of his, mind and his body into an environment where it was a different paradigm. And even though I could handle that as an adult, I felt the pressure of that. I felt the disbelief from the doctor as I explained what we were doing, sort of, not all the way, but I brought that information in there, and I felt him. And he was, recording and watching and telling him, hey, I'm not taking insulin, I'm curing it. And he listened as they basically tried to void out what he was saying and what he was experiencing. And of course, I didn't step in and say, hey, you can't tell my son that. I just let the thing go on. And this is maybe where I'm learning, and where I made the mistake is he came home and had a really bad day that day. He had a kind of an emotional breakdown. He had a freak out, kind of like before he ever had the diagnosis, where his nervous system was really, really, overshot. He was on the ground, he was crying, and it was very much like before this ever happened. And then the last 2 days, his blood sugar numbers have been higher. And I've been looking back through the notes going, he's not eating any different. It's not too high. It's not to the point where I would need to call anyone. But instead of being right around 100 and underneath, he's been at, like 120 in the morning or 140 in the morning just for these 2 days. And so I sat down with my dad today and I was talking about it. And I was like, I think him going to the doctor has caused the blood sugars to go up. I think his self-doubt, I think that paradigm has affected him and his belief in his body's ability to respond in the way that he knows he can. And we agreed that that paradigm was counter to what we were doing, and that it was very possible it was creating a different reality for my son. So I sat down with my son and I said, hey, we went to the doctor the other day. Do you think that your numbers are reflective of what they told you? And he got sad and emotional. He said, I'm just on a honeymoon stage. They said I still have diabetes and I'm going to have insulin again. And he got sad and he was crying, and I realized he'd taken that in. And I apologized to him. I said, I did not prepare you for that. And I had to give him the lowdown and say, he was, they come in their coats, they come in their degrees, they have their license. And he's like, hey, they're the authority. And I had to be like, baby, they have been trained in that kind of medicine. They've been trained in insulin, in shots, in disease, in illness, in not being a curable thing. That's their training. They are not trained in herbs. They are not trained in gems. They're not trained in affirmations. They're not trained in raw food. They're not trained in acupressure. They're not trained in any of the stuff that we are using for your body that's healing. And all these books and all these things that we're using, the Dr. Morse and the Dr. Cousins and all these other things, Dr. Christopher's formulas, those are all natural, or medical doctors turn natural, that have had positive and, patients cured from diabetes. That's the information we're following. We're the experts on what you're doing. They are only the experts on using insulin. They are only the experts on following the medical path. They do not know what we're doing, so they cannot tell us that we are wrong because they do not know. They were even writing down the books I told them. They were skeptical. They were unsure. And so we cannot believe their words about what we're doing. These are literally two different paradigms. And so I easily saw how anyone who was going down a healing path, who would take themselves into a realm where the information is counter to what they are doing, is going to encounter a conflict of interest and a suppression of their confidence. And luckily I was there to help turn that around. But an adult, say, who's trying to turn their health around but goes to a doctor to get checked up and is going to be infiltrated with the medical paradigm, which is not a healing paradigm. People don't heal in the medical paradigm. They get fixed, they get surgery, they get cut out, they get, things get stopped, but they don't heal. The medical paradigm is not a healing paradigm. It is a disease paradigm. So when we're talking about healing and we go into a paradigm that does not believe in cures, they don't believe in cures. So we can't go there and say, I'm curing myself, and believe that they're going to agree with us. We have to know they're going to disagree, and we have to hold that sacred container. And this is what I'm saying. Like anything you are wanting to create, your job is to create a sacred container around which that thing can be created without being disturbed by a field that does not believe in what you are creating. So I had to apologize to my son and say, I don't know if we're going to go back there as long as you are at all vulnerable to this. Because now I've talked him back, into the space where he knows. He made a little video about it. You can check out his YouTube channel, where he realized that he had kind of been duped. He had been talked out. He even said my organs were sad after that. He's very sensitive. He knows. And so after that, now we kind of had to work to turn it back around, but we're doing that. But for you, anything you are creating, and you bring it out in the open, you explain, you talk about it into a space where it is not going to be honored or received, where it is not going to be resonated with. This is where I want to say, be careful. You don't want to destroy your creation in the middle of its birthing process. And this is where I'm like, this was sensitive with my son. He's only 9. I brought him into a very maturely developed anti-paradigm to what he was developing. And I should have been more prepared, but I'm learning. And I'm telling you that if you're creating something for yourself, you be nurturing of that. Have a very strong container for that so that it does not get ruined. Because it's all about your mind. It's all about what you think about it, what you believe about it, what you've cultivated and created. You could be creating it all day long around this certain thing and have one person you think knows more than you come in and crash your thing that you're growing. So be careful with your creations. Nurture them. Have a proper container so they can develop fully. And this is the report that when you take those things into a paradigm that is opposite, you prepare yourself, you fortify yourself, or you don't go at all. And remember that not everybody thinks and believes like you, and that doesn't mean that what you're doing is impossible. It doesn't mean what you're doing is impossible. It just simply means that you have different facts than them. And that doesn't make yours wrong. It doesn't make yours impossible. You can do anything that you set yourself out to, that you surround yourself with the people who believe in you, and you continue down the path that you are going until you see the results you want, until you create the thing that you want, until you have the reality that you see in your inner vision. I know that to be true. Have a beautiful eclipse. Peace.